Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Going to be installing this Summit High Torque Mini Starter onto my Blueprint 383. It's got all the nice goodies that come along with it, and should be a real easy bolt-up application. Depending on your application, there's two sets of holes that you can use to mount it on. Make sure you use the correct holes to keep it away from the engine block as appropriate. Probably have to try once just to see. No worries. It was important for me to mock this up first before installing the engine. I wanted to make sure I had the header clearance I needed, and also I didn't want to be under the vehicle trying to take the starter on and off and make adjustments as necessary. So I opted to put it on first while I'm suspending it from my engine hoist. Probably not the best idea, moving around a little bit, but I didn't want to have it on the engine stand either, because then I couldn't get to the flex plate the way I wanted to. There's a few shims that come into the kit. The instructions will tell you you shouldn't have to use more than 2 of the shims, but I found that later on that 2 wasn't going to quite cut the mustard for my application. Also, in pulling out the pinion gear, I'm finding out that it's coming out a little bit too far. I checked it twice, but again, pinion's coming out more than 60% of the depth of the flywheel. You may hear me saying flywheel, flex plate. Anyway, that's pretty self-explanatory. You know what I'm referring to. So I end up having to take the starter off here. I'm going to have to go make some adjustments. What you don't see here is I actually put this thing on twice trying to get it right. So I'm going to need to adjust both the pinion depth, that is the distance that the pinion will come out of the starter, and also the spacing later on when I put it back on the engine with the shims. Some of these bolts were a little bit tough to crack. The one that's on the mount there, which I will call the clocking screw. The clocking screw will allow you to adjust the angle of the mounting base, and you can change it a little bit. That way you've got better clearance from your headers. So I've decided to move it one position, and I used both combination of a socket and a wrench to loosen up the other screws that were holding the starter motor to the mount. It's probably a good time to mention that if you didn't already know, the mounts for these, or the plate on it, is actually aluminum, and some of the screws here are stainless steel. I didn't use any anti-seize on them, but during my reassembly I thought I'd actually stripped one of them out, and I think it just seized. So I got one that was the same size but just a little bit longer to tighten it down. Make sure when you're tightening these down you follow the torque specs provided by the manufacturer. Don't get too wild on it. All I'm doing here when I put it back together is just doing it a little bit more than hand tight, and I went back later and checked the torque specs after the fact. So keep that in mind during your disassembly, and don't overdo it. Aluminum plate might be a problem if you actually strip one out. The space created for this pinion is accomplished by putting in a ring, a spacing ring that goes inside the mount. Think of it as a big washer. It goes in, gives you a little bit of extra space, and it goes around the bearing on the starter. And then you also have what would be otherwise a metal gasket that goes on, and it also compensates for adding the ring on the bearing. If you didn't put that in there, you might actually burn your bearing up by putting too much pressure on. So make sure you've got both of those added on there. One thing I should have done, and I'll mention when I was putting this back together, is when I took it apart, I should have taken a little marker and put an orientation marker on the one side of the motor and the plate, so when you put it back on you get it lined up. I had to play with it a little bit, turning it back around to make sure I had it pointed in the right direction. Not hard, but it's just easier if you went ahead and marked it to begin with. That way you're not fooling with it. I cut that out of the video so you didn't see me getting it wrong the first time. Would have been nice if I could have got my socket to fit in on every one of these screws going in. There's a cap head hex screw that is your clocking screw on the front. And on the back here, it's regular hex head screws. It's also got a Phillips type tip on it. Ended up having to use a screwdriver on part of it because the housing to the motor was too close to it, so I couldn't tighten it down with a socket. But between the screwdriver, open-end wrench, and a socket, you'll have enough to get the job done. Again, torque those down, get them snug, and don't forget to come back and torque appropriately according to your manufacturer instructions. Again, there's 3 positions on this that you can clock it at. I actually only moved it 1 position from where it was originally from the factory. That's probably as far as I could get before it would hit the motor itself. So I've got it in there, getting it away from the header a little bit, which was the desired intent. And then, of course, going back and tightening everything back down again, snugging it up a little bit more once I got the clocking screw set. All right. It's made a difference. I can't tell by looking at it, but the pinion's out, and it's less than what it was before. So, time to put it back on. Oh, there it is. Magically, it's back on the engine. Time to tighten down the screws and check my fit. I think I mentioned that the instructions said you shouldn't need more than 2 spacers on there, but I actually had to go up to the auto parts store and get a little pack of shims and put 1 more thin one in there to get the desired distance on the pinion from the flex plate that I wanted. I don't want that thing clunking around when I'm trying to start the engine. And just tightening it down so it's snug and checking the clearance. You might be able to see here, got the positioning on, and I'm putting my paper clip in, checking the distance on there. That's anywhere from 20 to 35 thousandths of an inch. Believe it or not, I had a few different paper clips that were different thickness, so I checked the thickness on those. And in here you'll see me slipping my finger in, checking the clearance between the solenoid and the header. So I've got some breathing room in there, and it's as close to the block as I could get it. My lesson here is if you can make the adjustments and test fit everything before you install the engine, I would do that. Thanks again, and I appreciate you watching. See you next time.